Good morning and welcome to part one of setting your price for your food product webinar. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the questions section of the GoToWebinar menu, and we will try to answer them at the end of the presentation. Go ahead, Jeff.
Great, thank you, Teresa. Good morning. My name is Jeff Fiddick. I'm a business development specialist with Manitoba Agriculture and Resource Development with the Food and Agri-Product Processing branch. We are the branch that deals with helping people like yourself commercialize your food and agri-products. So what our plan is for today is to, advance the slide here, sorry. There. Our plan for today is to do a couple things. We're first going to quickly look at how to set the price for a farmer's market. Then we're going to move on to setting prices for selling to grocery stores and wholesalers. We're going to calculate your cost of goods. Then we're going to capture all the other costs or fixed costs that you incur in operating your business. We're going to do as the flyer promised. We're going to teach you how to calculate your break even. Plus, we're going to show you about how to make a break even plus a profit. And then finally, we're going to close with some quick thoughts about pricing strategy. I actually do have a lot of content that is involved with pricing strategy, but this is just a bit of a summary and just a bit of a teaser. And then finally, you'll have an opportunity at the end of the content to ask any questions you may have. So I know that's probably a little tougher than asking them along the way, but I guess just for the sake of continuity, we'll give you the content, and then anything that occurs to you, please type it in when you think of it. All right, so first of all, let's look at setting the price for a farmer's market. Alrighty, so in terms of a quick method, I'm going to use something called a factor or a multiplier. And really, it's a really simple formula. For every $1 of your product cost, the retail selling price should be 4 times that. So as an example, if your product costs $1.57, we'll get into the details of how to figure out that cost in a moment. Your retail will be 4 times $1.57 or $6.28. So this formula here is intended to get you retail pricing that's going to be roughly consistent with what you would set your pricing at if you were going to go on and sell to a grocery retail store or to a wholesaler and use those intermediaries. So it's a good place for you to start and to start doing your pricing properly or appropriately right from the outset. So in terms of another term we'll use a lot here today is called gross profit margin, and it's a simple calculation, and it's a function of the retail selling price. So it's simply the retail minus the product cost, that result all divided by the retail. So a price that we figured out based on 4 times our cost was $6.28. We said our cost was $1.57. That results in a gross profit per unit of $4.71. If you divide that by the retail, you get that 75%. So that makes sense because if our cost was 1 out of the 4, that's 25. The cost is 25% of the selling price. So the rest of it is our profit. And that may seem really high to you, but that is actually the number that's needed. And then once we get into looking at pricing for grocery, we're not going to make that full margin. So we have to have a higher margin to start with so that once we start whittling it down, there's still an appropriate amount of profit left for yourself. So $6.28 is a bit of a weird retail. You would never charge that at a farmer's market. So let's say you rounded that up a bit. So here's what that looks like. Let's say we round up to $6.50. Our cost for this example is still $1.57. So we take the $6.50 minus the $1.57 gives you $4.93. That's your gross profit per unit. You divide that by $6.50, and our margin, our gross profit margin, it's a percent, sneaks up a little bit to 75.8%. Or conversely, you can round down a bit to $6. Same kind of math. Your gross profit drops by 50 cents. That makes sense because we dropped the retail by that much. And now you're down to 73.8% gross profit. So like I said, as a guideline, you want to be around the 75. If it works out that you're slightly lower, that's okay. Of course, what you can do too is maybe your daily price is $6.50 and maybe you offer a promotion of $6 or buy two for $12, works up to $6 a piece. You can always do something creative like that with your pricing. So what if you think your product is worth $7? You look at your product and go, this is a really great product. I think I can get $7 for it. Or you know what? I think I can actually get $8 for it. My advice to you is at a farmer's market, go ahead and test it. Because the thing is that you can test a lower price as a promotion. So you don't have to commit to that lower price. You can test it and you can make a big deal that it's a promotion, or you can be quieter about it being a promotion. But just you're a lot better off. It's a lot easier to start too high and then offer a lower price as a promotion to test it out. And the thing is if you find that you've hit a sweet spot with that lower price, then you can always set that as your new regular price. And that is something I always encourage clients to do is don't feel like you have to lock in your prices for the entire season. It's your product, it's your prerogative as to what you're going to charge. And you can change that daily, weekly, during the day if you want to, just in terms of what you want to try to accomplish. And I say that because a farmer's market is a wonderful place to do this kind of testing. And what you want to do is you want to find the price that the market will bear. That's what is the most that you can get for your product. It's also a great venue for you to gather sales data, because you can gather sales data so that when you go and present to a retail grocery store and they ask you, does it sell? Or they balk at your price, they think it's too high, you can come back and say, well, I happen to sell 50 a week or 50 a day at the farmer's market at $7 each. So there you go. That's information is power. So that's a very powerful metric that you can provide to them. So I mentioned what the market will bear. Essentially, you want to take the perspective of what is the most I can get for my product. And rather than saying, what is the least I would take for my product? It's a much more submissive position to take. So you want to use your expertise. Every one of you has this. You have an expertise as a consumer. You've gone through your life making purchase decisions. You stand in the store and you evaluate this alternative versus another alternative. And you know, whatever is informing your decision making, you're making a decision, you're making an assessment as to the best value that you want to get. You also want to consider that not everyone needs to be your customer. You don't have to accommodate every single person who walks by your table and be the perfect thing for them. Not everyone's going to buy into your pricing or your story about your local and how you do your production and your processes and all that sort of thing. Really, so long as there's enough people willing to purchase your product at the price you want to sell it for, you can go forth and do quite well. Okay, so that's a quick discussion about selling to farmers markets. Let's now move on to selling to the trade. So the trade is essentially grocery stores, wholesalers, those kind of entities. So I like to tell everyone that it's an exciting time to be you. And the reason is that there was a survey done of 800 Manitoba primary grocery shoppers a few years back. In that survey, 78% of respondents claimed they would buy more Manitoba grown or processed foods if they're available in stores where they now shop. That's a wonderful metric. That's a huge proportion of the population who is interested in buying your products, but they want the convenience of being able to buy them at their favorite stores. So what's really exciting right now is the fact that major banners like Sobeys, Safeway, and Co-op have really gotten on board with bringing local products into stores. I actually just had sent an email yesterday to the gentleman who is the local product development manager for Safeway Sobeys, and kind of gave him a heads up about a local company that I thought would be a great fit for their stores, and he agreed completely, and he was actually already working on it already. So it's really awesome that we've got this great relationship with these banners, We've been in their stores for workshops. We walk their stores with tours. They come and they participate in our workshops as well and offer their advice to you as to what it takes to get listed in their stores. A little bit of a fancy flourish there. All right, so when selling to wholesale distributors and retailers, like I mentioned, it's just called selling to the trade. So this is opposed to selling directly to consumers. You might still sell directly to a consumer, but that would be in the form of, let's say, doing an in-store demonstration. But ultimately, that consumer would pick up your product and take it to that store's front end, and they're going to pay the store for that, and you'll get your portion of it. Now, one thing different here is that you're going to be selling to the store, so and therefore you're going to be selling by the case quantity. You're not going to take an armload of your products into the store and and sell them 7 of something. You'll sell them by the case quantity. Now, one thing when you're selling to the trade, especially to retailers, we're by law restricted in terms of dictating the selling price to consumers. We can't legally tell a retailer, you must charge $3.99 for my product. However, if we know how much they need to make on our product, and it's as simple as asking, or we kind of know from working with them, we can make assumptions and we can price our product appropriately so that when they take their markup that we think they're going to take, it's going to land at that $3.99 that we would like them to sell the product at. So just in terms of the flow of goods and pricing, DSD is direct store delivery, and essentially that would be how the major banners, so Safeway, Sobeys, Co-op, are all willing to take product from you at this time. So that's pretty much the main way. I've set up all my charts to be consistent with the pricing template that you received last night. And the way I built that was I've got you at the bottom of the chart with your cost of goods, and then we're adding on the various costs of accessing channel partners. And with that kind of shows the flow of goods, and it shows how the price or the cost percolates from the bottom to the top, with the final price at the top being the consumer or the end user's cost to acquire your product. So remember when we just talked about selling to a farmer's market, I'm using the exact same numbers here. So we've got your cost. So for every $1 of your cost, the consumer cost should be $3.99. I rounded up to 4 because no one wants to handle pennies at a farmer's market. So here for retail, we made it $3.99. Now, of course, when you're selling to a retail grocery store, you're not going to get that full $3.99. So we need to sell it to a grocery store at a lower amount to allow them room to make some money. Most stores typically want a 35% gross margin on the retailer selling price as their profit. That's for most items, most categories. I'll show you some numbers in the second part of this workshop, where there's a couple different numbers for different things, mainly if you're selling as an ingredient. But essentially, just to work through this, is if your cost is $1, your selling price should be $2.59. Your selling price becomes the retailer's cost, and the retailer's selling price becomes the consumer's cost. So there's a chain, there's a flow here in terms of the goods. So this gives the retailer 35% gross margin. This gives you 61% gross margin. So not too bad. And it's weird how the numbers work in terms of, remember, we had a 75% margin from us to the consumer, and despite adding 35 and 61, like that should add up to a lot more, but it's because what the numbers are a percentage of. That's what makes the difference. And I'm sure we can have all sorts of fun figuring out the math on that. Okay, that's good there. So just in terms of working through some examples here of the, you call it the factor method. And again, I've got arrows here just to indicate And I caught myself yesterday because I had some of these charts going from the top to the bottom, and then I got kind of confused because it's just like, well, the pricing percolates up. So I've created all these examples such that you need to read them from the bottom to the top. So that it's consistent. I found it easier. I hope you do too. So for every dollar of your COGS, cost of goods sold, or your cost of your product, and again, I'll get into the details of that in a bit, your retailer cost, you're going to sell it for $2.59, and the consumer is going to pay $3.99. So, okay, we already did this. So as an example, let's say you work it out and the cost of your product is $2.11. So you would take the factor 2.59 times $2.11. That means you're going to sell it to the retailer for $5.47. The retailer is going to turn around and sell it to their customers for $8.42. Now, of course, that's a weird retail. They would round it up, and then we would say, well, maybe we'll increase our cost a little bit so that ultimately it works out to an even number, like $8.49, let's say. That's something where the pricing tool that you received last night is going to be really helpful, where you can do that tinkering really easily, and it spits it out automatically for you. So one thing to keep in mind is the margins are the same. So despite the fact that we've multiplied the numbers by a cost of goods, so the $2.11, the margins for yourself remain 61% in this example, and 35% for the retailer. So those are going to be consistent. So that's kind of an easy way in terms of saying, here's what my cost is, and if you multiply it out, here's where the retail needs to be. Now, and that extra opportunity is, let's say you do get listed with Safeway and Sobeys, and they want you to bring your product to them direct to store, but you're listed in 10 stores, and maybe that's just a bit overwhelming for you to deal with. You can work with a local distributor. There are some local wholesale distributors who actually serve the Safeway and Sobeys stores. So for a fee, they will bring your goods from you to the different stores, and they'll service the section and do that kind of work for you. So again, we're showing that the product flows from you to the wholesaler, to the retailer, to the consumer. So we've added this extra partner. So you can just be dealing with the wholesaler, and then the wholesaler can take care of dealing with the retailer. So since we've added another partner in the supply chain here, you're going to have to take a little bit more of a discount on what you were selling the product for. So for every dollar of cost, you would sell it to the wholesaler for $2.22. So remember, we were previously selling it to the retailer at $2.59. We're taking a bit more of a discount and selling it to a wholesaler. Now, one challenge here is that we do not control what the wholesaler is going to add or mark it up and sell it to the retailer. So what's really important to do is, before you disclose any of your pricing, you want to talk to a wholesaler and ask them, what is your gross margin, or what is your upcharge? Some work one way, some work the other. And then to make sure that your pricing is going to be consistent, such that you can sell it to the wholesaler appropriately. So when they add their markup, their upcharge, it's going to land at the retailer about where you want it to be, so that the retailer will continue to sell it for the $3.99 in this example. So it's not going to be out of where the market will bear. So just in terms of illustrating the cost of this, so for every dollar of cost of goods, your selling price would be $2.22. Your selling price becomes the wholesaler cost. This example here is based on the wholesaler adding a 17% markup or upcharge to the wholesaler cost, which would hopefully land them at the $2.59, which is what we were previously selling directly to the retailer. That means that wholesaler selling price becomes the retailer's cost, and then they would do their thing, take their 35% gross profit and sell it to the consumer for $3.99. And you'll notice I'm using some different language when talking about the wholesaler in terms of an upcharge or a markup. That's the only time we would use that kind of language is when you're talking about a wholesaler. Every other time for yourself, you want to work on gross margin, which is a function of the selling price. The retailer always works on gross margin, which is a function of the selling price. And I'll show you a bit more detail on that in a second. So in terms of the margins now, so your margin has eroded a bit. That makes sense because we are selling it to a wholesaler. Someone is doing some work for us, so we have to compensate them. And like I mentioned, you want to back down your price a little bit so that ultimately the consumer is going to be paying the same amount. And it's essentially a seamless transition from you selling to the consumer versus you selling to the retailer who sells to the consumer versus you selling to a wholesaler who sells to the retailer who sells to the consumer. If your gross margin goes down to 55%, I mentioned I based the wholesaler upcharge on 17%. I've seen them between 15 and 20% locally. We've got the retailer gross margin at 35 consistently, and then the consumer cost. So just another example on this one. So this is using the same cost of goods as we had before. So we've still got our cost of goods. So now we have our wholesaler cost, 222, and then like I say, we don't know what the retailer cost is going to be. It's dependent upon the wholesaler. So as an example, if your cost of goods is 211, you can multiply the factor 2.22, which is the wholesaler cost, times that. You would sell it to the wholesaler for 468. And then like I say, hopefully if the wholesaler added 17%, as in my example, they would sell it for 547 and the consumer cost would be 842. There's a little bit of wiggle room there. So if the wholesaler adds a few extra pennies versus what you had anticipated, if it lands such that the retailer can make 34.8% or 5%, 34.5%, they could very well be happy with that. They may say close enough and kind of let those few pennies slide. Okay, one thing too, and I'm going to bring into the discussion about cases here is, like I mentioned, when you sell to the trade, you have to put your product into cases. They're not going to handle eaches. So just in terms of the way the pricing works for that, for these factors, I've made it a case of 10, kind of a weird number. Normally it could be 6s or 8s or 12s. It could be whatever you need it to be, really. I made it 10s just for the math to be simple. So here's what this looks like in terms of the case pricing. Of course, you're not going to sell cases to consumers. So now what I want to do is I want to show you a little bit more detail between you and the wholesale distributor. So these two arrows here, I'm just going to explode this a little bit. So there, I popped open 2 more spaces here. So we still have everything else. We have you, wholesale distributor, retail, grocery store, and the consumer. So I want to show you a bit more detail here because when we do some more calculations, you're going to notice there's going to be a gap between what I'm telling you is right for here versus where we land here. And essentially the discrepancy is due to the inclusion of the costs associated with accessing channel partners. So yes, there was a cost for accessing the wholesale distributor. There's the margin taken by the retail grocery store. That's another cost. But there's also a couple more potential costs. And I always encourage you to include these costs now because you want to plan for your future success. As you get bigger and bigger, there will come a day when a retail chain will come to you and say, we'd like you to participate in our marketing programs, or we'd like you to pay us a cooperative advertising allowance or an annual volume rebate or whatever, or participate in our Air Miles program. And then further to that, you may want to contract a sales agent or a broker or someone to help you penetrate markets, get your product on the shelves, get your product known, and there's a cost associated with that. So in terms of looking at these, now those are things where we're going to include them in the pricing. So we want to keep this top line pricing consistent. We really don't want to be passing this along to the consumer. So it's going to be kind of absorbed, and of course our margin will go down slightly here. So in terms of the amounts, a sales agent commission would be typically 5%. That's the normal amount for our industry. Program monies works out to, it could be up to 13%. So I put the full 13% in there. Okay, now your margin goes down to 45%. We've got the sales agent at 5%, inside monies at 13%, wholesaler charge at 17%, the retail margin the same. So that's what that looks like. So just to summarize, there's a couple different calculations for you. So when you know the selling price, you may want to calculate what is the cost. So if you decide I want to sell this product for $3.99, what do I need to charge a retailer, let's say, in order for that retailer to make the margin? So the math is really simple. It's the selling price times 1 minus their target gross margin. So it'll be, this example will be $3.99 times 1 minus 35%. Remember I said a retailer likes to make 35% margin. So 35% is simply 0.35. 1 minus that is 0.65. So there's that $2.59 selling price to the retailer we had arrived at earlier. Conversely, when you know the cost, but you want to figure out what is the retail or the selling price, you would take the cost divided by 1 minus the target gross profit margin. Divided by 1, and that gives you the selling price. So if we took that cost that we just figured out, $2.59, divided by 1 minus the 35%. So if we went to a retailer and said, this is what I'd like to charge you for this product, they'll do a calculation, and then they'll say, okay, that means I need to sell it for $3.99. So that's exactly how they would get to that number. Now, differently, as I pointed out, the wholesale distributor is going to use a different calculation. They may add an upcharge. So what they're doing is they're taking their wholesale cost, and then they're going to add some amount. So that's going to be, so if we sell it to them for $2.22, remember that was the factor when selling to that level, and let's say they add 17%, you take the 222 times 0.17 is 37 cents. You add the 37 cents to the 222, and look at that, there's the 259 that we saw before. All right, so now we're ready to move on to talking about cost of goods, or cost of goods sold, or COGS. So there are two different perspectives on this, and essentially there's an accountant's perspective, which doesn't, in my opinion, doesn't necessarily work insofar as properly informing the costing and the pricing exercise. Their focus is on generating income statements, balance sheets. Cash flow statements are actually pretty handy. The thing is there's a time sensitivity to the documents. They amortize things and they add costs that aren't necessarily real costs because you're not spending cash. They use the inventory timing as part of the calculation. They typically like to include a portion of fixed costs and COGS, and that's something we don't do. And they may or may not include the direct labor as part of the cost of goods either. So, and also finally, they may use the cost-based approach to selling prices. So what I showed you may look kind of cost-based, but ultimately we are looking to the market and whether the price that we're arriving at is appropriate to the market. So in my opinion, the best application for documents generated by an accounting professional would be for your annual documents, statements of your company's value and how you're doing your sales, and for tax mitigation. Now, for the purposes of doing an analysis of your costing and setting your pricing, that's where a marketer's perspective, in my opinion, is more effective as a marketer, of course. And it's something called a contribution analysis. So it's not time sensitive. We're only concerned with actual costs, so we don't include amortization. We don't worry about inventory ups and down. We're kind of looking at an average. What are your costs on average? We never include part of fixed and COGS. We always include direct labor, even if it's you. And the thing is this methodology is consistent with your competition, with your peers. So this is, in my opinion, the best way to go in this regard. So this is what a contribution analysis looks like. It's pretty simple. You have your revenue or your sales, that's your top line. Take off your cost of goods or COGS, cost of goods sold, and you get a gross profit. You take off your cost of sales, I'll get into detail about that in a second, and you get your contribution to fixed expenses. Then you take off your fixed expenses and you get your net profit before taxes. So pretty simple. So in terms of what's typical for these, so this is based on industry data from all food processors in Canada. So the numbers should look, no, that's okay. So the revenue, let's say for every $100 of revenue, on average, the cost of goods for processors is $59. So the difference between that and the 100 is $41. Typically, the cost of sales is $3. Gives them $38 contribution to their fixed expenses. They're fixed through 27 for a net profit of $11. And these are numbers that are based on selling to wholesale. So in terms of converting these to percentages, it's the exact same numbers. I just put percentages because since the top line is 100, everything can be a function of that very easily and give us the same numbers. So in my opinion, the average gross profit for processors in Canada landed at 41%. I'm thinking they probably were targeting 45%, nice even number. And just through the course of discounting and that sort of thing, they ended up at 41%, okay? So let's make the arbitrary decision to set our target at 45%. And that's a number we had used before. And that's kind of the lowest you would want to endeavor to be at as a gross profit margin on your selling price on a regular basis. You can do promotions and have a lower price point, lower gross margin on a promotional basis, but I would not encourage you to have anything less than the 40, significantly less than the 45 for a sustained period of time. So the cost of goods is pretty simple. It's the landed cost of your food ingredients, your unit packaging, and your master case packaging. Plus, it's going to be the direct labor to make and package your product. The landed cost means the cost to bring the ingredients and the packaging to your place of business. So if there's freight included, that would be part of the cost of that good. If you're going around town picking stuff up in your car, I probably wouldn't waste the time of figuring out how much gas you spent doing that and trying to put it into each ingredient. You could just throw that into a fixed cost. So there's a whole shopping list of things that cost of goods does not include. So it includes equipment, cost of building or renting a facility or renting equipment, hydro, cost to have your website designed, cost to design product labels, cost of services you might engage at the food development center, such as nutrition facts tables or label consultation, cost to hire professionals like accountants and lawyers and business consultants, office space or car, or depreciation. So back to what it does include is the food ingredients. So there'll be some wastage as well. Could include destructive sampling. So if you take one muffin out of every batch and tear it apart and taste it and inspect it, make sure it's made right, you would include the cost of that in there. The unit packaging, so that would be packaging, let's say a pack, 6 muffins, so there'd be a tray, maybe you overwrap it, maybe there's a label on top of it. Bread, be the twist tie, the closure label. The master case packaging, so that's the corrugate box that you would put a number of packages of your muffins into. It includes the tape, includes the label, and then finally the labor costs to make the muffins, to package them in the unit packages, and for putting them into the case. And I encourage you, I implore you to avoid the temptation to not include the cost of labor, even if it's you, even if it's family members, because the thing is you're really hoping that maybe there'll come a day when you're not having to do all the production, or maybe your family isn't doing the production. Maybe they want to go off and do other things. So you really don't want to be putting yourself in a place where you're working for free. You want to charge the real wage to yourself, and whether you collect it or not, you want to have it in there. Another thing too is this is used by lenders, this is used by grantors, like government grantors, in terms of assessing whether your enterprise is a real business versus a hobby. If it's a hobby, you may be less inclined to gain any support in terms of funding. So just in terms of revisiting those factors we talked about, the cost, there's a cost to retail relationship. So for every dollar of cost of goods, it's all those things we just went through, times the retail factor that the consumer is going to pay, here's what your retail looks like. So if your cost was $2, your retail should land around $7.98, $7.99. Put in a slightly different perspective, for every 10 cents of cost that you add to your product, the retail needs to be 4 times that. So for every 10 cents, you're adding 40 cents to the retail. So that's something that can explode very quickly. So something that you definitely want to be in control of. So just as an aside to that point is, is that if you were, let's say we're looking at one ingredient for making apple pies, so the apples. Let's say if you're growing your own and your cost of production was $1 for an amount of apples to make a pie. You might sell them to a wholesaler for $2. The wholesaler would sell them for $2.67. A retailer would sell them for $4.10. So if you were in the position of having to buy these apples and you're buying them at wholesale, well, you're paying twice as much as if you made them yourself. Of course, the reality is most of us can't make our own food product like that. So that's the best case scenario. If you're buying them at wholesale, if you're buying at wholesale, it's going to be $2.67. But if you're buying at retail, there's really not a lot of room there for you to make any sort of margin on this product. So therefore, it is important that you buy at wholesale. If you are buying at retail now, just to kind of get a sense as to making a product and vetting a product, that's fine. You can get a rough sense in terms of taking of the cost of that by taking about 30% off. That's a duplicate. Oh, I see. That's nice. All right. So the process for calculating your cost of goods sold. And really this, I don't have any nice charts for you in this one. It really is a fairly manual process. So just going to kind of walk through this here, and I see I'm getting shorter on time. So in terms of the ingredients, so if you scale your recipe by weight, you would essentially need to take the proportion, like the amount that you're using as a proportion of the total times the cost of that. So if you're using 6 pounds of flour, it would be, sorry, this should be a 6. 6 divided by 25 times the price that it costs you to buy that bag of flour. So 6 over 25 is 0.24 times $6.99. So for a batch that uses that ingredient, the cost would be $1.68. And you would need to repeat that for each ingredient. If you're scaling your recipe using smaller numbers, smaller measures, such as cups and tablespoons and teaspoons, there's a way where you can convert them to the weight. And that's probably the easiest way. Now, the only challenge with that is that the weight of each ingredient is quite different. So you can look up, there are charts online you can find and use a different weight for each ingredient, or you can kind of take an average just to get a rough idea as to what the cost is going to be, which might be good for that scale. It's the same idea where you take the proportion of something divided by the total amount you're purchasing times the purchase cost. And then you end up with a cost for that ingredient for that batch. So it's all based on a batch. So once you have all the costs for a batch, let's say you're making muffins, you have a total cost for that batch, you have a yield for the batch, you're gonna take the total cost over the yield. So we're gonna get 10 cents per muffin. Now, if you're packaging 6 muffins in a package or a unit, you would multiply that by 6. So your food cost is 60 cents in this example. Take the unit packaging, it's the same thing for everything. You're going to buy packages, let's say a case of 100 muffin trays for $24.67. The cost for each one is that divided by 100, or 25 cents a piece. So then we've got that for our unit package, and there's going to be the cost of the label as well. Like I mentioned, you need to package everything in a corrugate box. So then we are going to take the cost of the box by how many packages we put into the box. Just to make the different numbers, I said 8 packages of muffins. So we're going to take the cost of the box divided by the number of packages of the unit we put in the box. So that's 9 cents is allocated to each package of muffins. Then we get into the labor. So for the labor, there's the 3 parts. The production, the unit packaging, and the case packaging. You want to include the time that it takes to do that activity. And I would just worry about the active time when you're actively handling something. So when the scaling, the mixing, the drop-in of muffins, let's say, when you're actually handling the product. If you're proofing something and it's working away on its own, you can go and do something else. I wouldn't include that time. Baking time, I wouldn't include that time. And you want to include a real actual wage that you would have to pay a stranger. So if you're doing a job that you would need to pay someone $18 an hour, then you should put it in there. The sheet that I've sent you adds 18% to the cost to allow for the extra costs of having staff. So I'm just going to check in with Teresa here for a second. Do we have a lot of questions, Teresa?
I don't have any questions at the moment, Jeff. You can continue on.
Okay, wonderful. Well, maybe then if it's okay, I'm going to carry on here, working through this. And I think we should be, if people have budgeted an hour for this, I will carry on with the content, and I'll try and stop about 5 minutes before the time, and that should probably allow enough for questions if we don't have a lot by this time. That's okay. All right, so I'm going to carry on here if hopefully that's okay with you folks. Just to continue working through this, and again, it would be a fairly manual process. If you have an Excel program or some spreadsheet program that would help you with this, that would be really great. Ultimately, I would encourage you to use the free tool that you received last night. It's got all this stuff built in for you, and it's fairly easy to use, and you'll see that when we do the next webinar. So let's say something takes you 85 minutes to make a batch of muffins. You're going to take, just like the ingredients, you're going to take proportions here. So 85 minutes over 65 minutes per hour, 60 minutes per hour, sorry, times the wage rate of $18 per hour. So 85 over 60 is 1.42 hours, times $18 per hour is $25.50 for wages. If you add the 18%, so you're going to take 25.50 plus 25.50 times 0.18, you get $30.09 of wages for production per batch of product. Now we divide it out to each muffin. So there are 148 muffins per batch. Do the math, it's about 20 cents a muffin. Remember, we're putting 6 muffins in a package, so it works out to $1.20 per labor per package of muffins to make the muffins. And we're going to do the same for the unit packaging. Same rules apply. So if it takes 12 minutes to package the muffins, but maybe for this activity, we can use a lower paid staff person because it's a fairly rudimentary activity. So let's say it takes 12 minutes out of 60 minutes per hour times $12 wage per hour. So we do the math, we get $2.40 plus 18% is $2.83 per batch, which works out to 2 cents a muffin times 6 muffins is 12 cents a package to package the muffins. The case packing labor, same rules again. We're going to divide out the, we figure out, kind of measure the time, whatever it takes on average. So we'll say 6 minutes to make the boxes, pack the boxes, close the boxes, label the boxes, and that works out to 6 cents a package. So just to summarize all the calculations we've done here, we have our food cost. So this is the actual cost of the ingredients. The packaging cost, this is per package of 6 muffins, is 25 cents. The case allocates out to 9 cents per package of muffins. The labor was $1.20 per package of muffins. Unit packaging, 12 cents. Master packaging, 6 cents. So it comes out to a total cost of $2.33 per package of 6 muffins. So now that's our cost. We can use our factors to figure out what should we charge a retailer if we're selling direct to store delivery, and what would they charge a consumer. So we can use the factors from before. So our cost of goods is $2.33. $2.59 times the $2.33, we would sell it to retailer for $6.04. They would sell it to a consumer for $9.30. We probably round down a penny. So these numbers give you a 61% margin, or the retailer 35% margin. And what about everything else? You can have all sorts of other costs that you're going to incur to operate your business. So that'll be your fixed costs. And there's a whole shopping list of all the different things that you're going to incur. So it's everything that you're spending that's not going to be included as part of your cost of goods. In terms of fixed costs, I like to break them out as cost of sales and fixed costs. So the cost of sales are, as the name implies, costs that you incur to make sales. So it's going to be specific to that task. So it might be advertising, website hosting. So these are things that they're fixed, they're sunk, you've spent the money, but you could maybe cancel it, like website hosting or something like that, or advertising. You can change that month to month, so that can vary. So if we populate it with an example, then the rest of the fixed costs, sorry, I'm going kind of fast here, being cognizant of time. Then the rest of the fixed costs, food production, facility rental. That's something where, let's say you were using a facility and you knew exactly how much time you were using and how much yield you were getting. You would get a number per unit, but the thing is you would still not want to include that as part of your cost of goods, because you got to think forward to a time when you may own your own facility, and that's going to become a fixed asset. And at that point, you're not going to allocate a cost of the fixed facility into every single unit. And the thing is your competitors wouldn't do that either. So you want to be consistent and start out now with not including that. In terms of calculating the break-even point, we determine our cost of goods, we determine a wholesale selling price, we figure out the gross profit per unit, and then we can just divide that cost of sales, cost and other fixed expenses by the gross profit per unit. Determine this wholesale selling price. So let's say our cost of goods, we worked it out to $1.76 per unit. So to figure out our wholesale selling price is the same formula as before. Our target gross margin is 45%. That's the lowest we would want to make. So we would do the math and come out with a wholesale selling price of $3.20. Our gross profit is going to be the $3.20 minus your cost is $1.44 gross profit per unit. Just to check our math, we had another formula where we take our sell minus our cost divided by our sell. So remember, we calculated it to be $3.20. Our cost was $1.76. Then you divide that result by 320. Voila, there's our 45%. So to calculate the break-even point, remember the figure for our cost of sales was $401.79 a month. We divide that by our gross profit per unit, and that gives us 279 units per month we would need to sell to break even on the cost of sales. If you take the other fixed costs, the example we had $3,085 of fixed costs per month, divided by our gross profit per unit is $1.44. And it gives you 2,142 units per month. There's just the dollars for that. And then you can just simply combine the two. So here's all the numbers we had. And then we combine it. You can also put into cases. Let's say we put 12 units in a case. So overall, we need to sell about 200 cases a month to break even when selling it at 320, making 45% margin. So the thing is that we are just breaking even. And that's what this looks like here. So here's our contribution analysis. Our revenue would be 77.47. Our cost of goods is 55% of that. Our gross profit is 45% of that. Here's the cost of sales, works out to 5%. Our contribution to fixed and our fixed expenses. So we're absolutely breaking even. So hopefully you're at least paying yourself at this point. So now we want to figure out, well, what if we of course want to make some money. So this is essentially a budgeting tool. So what you want to do is kind of pick some arbitrary number and say, well, how much would I like this business to make per month? So let's make the arbitrary decision and say $2,000 a month. So you just simply add that as part of the fixed cost. So now it raises the total fixed cost from $3,400 to $5,400. And we can go through, our gross profit is still the same since we haven't changed that. And we can just go through the exact same numbers again, with the exact same calculations. And now with the higher fixed cost, that means the revenue has to go up. We need to sell more units. But now we have a net profit before tax of 2,000. And everything's a function of the top line. And I will share it, we will send this out to you so you can take a look at it after and ask questions afterwards too, and once you take a look. So just putting this into perspective, this is also something the tool will do for you, is you need to produce 43 cases per week, 516 units per week. Your yield, let's say your yield per batch is 360 units per batch. It takes you 2.3 hours to make a batch. That means you need 3.4 hours to make the amount that you need per week. So it kind of does some of those calculations for you, figures out that stuff. I also run through an example here just in terms of saying, well, we can look at other margins and we've got some tables for you, but maybe I'll stop there and just again check and see if there's some questions.
No questions yet.
Okay, should I continue?
You can, you've got a few more minutes before 11 o'clock.
Okay, I shall continue. I just have a couple more slides. There's always so much to tell you, so I like to share as much as possible here. So essentially, if you're looking at the margin, say, well, why are we only settling for 45? Well, we don't have to. We can try different margins, and essentially, be a matter of going through the numbers again. And again, this is where the pricing tool is really helpful, because you can change one thing and it just does everything for you automatically. So it's kind of nice that way. So I made a little table here for you. So essentially, if you were to look at different examples, this is what we could use. So let's say our cost of goods is always constant at $1.76 for our product. And if we're going for a gross margin of 45%, our wholesale will be $3.20. Our retail to the consumer, or the retailer's selling price to the consumer, would be $4.99, and they're making around 35%. And we just kind of move along here. So we increase the gross by 5% to 50, to 55, to 60, to 65, and so on. Our wholesale price goes up each time, so your gross profit goes up each time. And of course, the retail to the consumer needs to go up. And I put in kind of what the numbers might look like to keep landing at about a 35% margin here. And then this is just the same chart. It just shows our gross profit here. Remember how this is going up because we're increasing our gross margin. The retail increases, and then our break even is going to go down because that makes sense because we're making more money on every single unit. So this is units, and this is cases. And the numbers just kind of keep going down. And of course, it comes into the question of, is our product worth $8.99 or $7.79? Maybe we can't get that for it. Maybe we can only get $5.99. It's one of those things where if you do some testing at the farmer's market, then that's a great place to do that. And then finally, just a couple quick notes on pricing strategy. We're going to do another complete webinar on this topic, but just want to say a couple points, and that's to be deliberate when you set your pricing. You want to focus on pricing for positioning in terms of price quality relationship. You want to maximize your profit. You might have some promos sometime to induce customer trial. And with the last point being to be competitive. Don't focus on your competitors, focus on your own business, run your own pricing strategy. So compete with products that are similar to your own. I fully believe in charging a premium price, try and get as much as you can. You want to validate that you're making a decent profit too for whatever price you set. So in my experience, I find that you're better off having a higher everyday price than trying to be a low price every day. Because the thing is, with a low price, you have nowhere to go. With a price that's a little bit on the high side, you have room to offer features and promos, and that can be used to drive consumer trial of your product. It gets a special tag put up in the store, draws attention to it, and a promo also provides you justification to ask for off-shelf displays or end displays to get extra space for your product. And that's called a high-low pricing strategy. And it's one that major grocers like Co-op, Sobe, Safeway, they use on a daily basis, and they have their weekly flyers to promote it. So there, I apologize, it was a little bit long, probably a lot of content to take in, but we will send you a PDF of the presentation. You're welcome to review it. Please email or call me with any questions you may have. I'd be more than happy to elaborate on anything. Or anyone emailing questions, we can publish the question and the answer to everyone who attended today. And I'll check in again with Teresa and see if we have any questions. Or
we do have a couple questions, but we have to end the webinar right now, so we could email the answers out to them.
Of course.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Very good.
My apologies to the attendees on that, but we will email you everyone the questions and the answers to the questions. And thank you for your questions and for your time today.